First story, by Adam Smith. I had been working as a pizza delivery driver for a couple of years, and I had seen my fair share of strange and unsettling things during my late-night shifts. But nothing could have prepared me for the night I delivered a pizza to the cabin in the woods. It was a chilly autumn evening in upstate New York, and the moon hung low in the sky as I navigated the winding, desolate roads. The GPS on my phone led me deeper into the forest, and I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The dense trees seemed to close in around me, casting eerie shadows on the road. Finally, I arrived at the cabin. It was a decrepit, ramshackle structure that looked like it hadn't been inhabited in years. The windows were boarded up, and the porch sagged under the weight of neglect. I parked my car and grabbed the pizza, hesitating for a moment before approaching the front door. I knocked, and the sound echoed through the stillness of the night. There was no answer, so I knocked again, louder this time. Just as I was about to turn and leave, the door creaked open slowly, revealing a dimly lit interior. I stepped inside cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. The air was stale and heavy, and the only light came from a flickering candle on an old wooden table. As I ventured further into the cabin, I noticed strange symbols etched into the walls, and a sense of foreboding washed over me. That's when I saw him, a tall, thin man standing in the corner of the room, his face hidden in the shadows. He didn't move or acknowledge my presence. I cleared my throat nervously and held out the pizza. I have your pizza," I stammered. Still, the man didn't respond. He just stood there, like a statue, his gaze fixed on some unseen point in the room. I took a step back, my mind racing with fear and confusion. What was going on here? Just as I was about to turn and run, a voice, soft and distant, whispered in my ear, "Leave the pizza and go." I dropped the pizza on the table, not bothering to collect payment, and bolted for the door. The night air was cold and refreshing as I stumbled back to my car. I glanced back at the cabin one last time and saw the man still standing in the doorway, his eyes now glowing with an otherworldly light. I sped away from that place, my heart still racing, and never looked back. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night. But I do know one thing: I'll never make a delivery to a cabin in the woods again. Second story, by Sarah Adams. It was a Friday night in downtown Chicago, and I was working the late shift at the pizzeria. The orders were pouring in, and I was making deliveries left and right. But one order stood out from the rest: a large pepperoni pizza to be delivered to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. I had heard stories about that place, rumors of it being haunted or used for illegal activities. But I was just a delivery driver, and I had a job to do. So, I hopped in my car and drove to the warehouse. When I arrived, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread wash over me. The warehouse was enormous, its windows shattered and walls covered in graffiti. There was an eerie silence that hung in the air, broken only by the distant hum of the city. I cautiously entered the building, the sound of my footsteps echoing through the vast space. As I made my way deeper into the warehouse, I noticed strange markings on the floor, symbols that I couldn't quite decipher. My nerves were on edge, but I pressed on. Finally, I reached the designated spot, a small, dimly lit room at the back of the warehouse. There, I found a man sitting alone at a table, his back hunched and his face hidden beneath a hood. I cleared my throat and announced my presence. "I've got your pizza." The man didn't respond, but I could see his shoulders trembling as if he were laughing silently to himself. It sent a shiver down my spine, but I pushed the pizza toward him and told him the total. Still, he didn't move. It was then that I noticed a faint, rhythmic chanting coming from somewhere in the warehouse. The sound was low and eerie, sending chills down my spine. I took a step back, my heart pounding, and that's when I saw them, a group of people dressed in dark robes, standing in a circle around us. They were chanting in a language I couldn't understand, and their eyes were fixed on the man at the table. I turned to run, but before I could make my escape, the man at the table suddenly looked up at me, and his face contorted into a grotesque, unnatural smile. It was then that I realized the chanting was growing louder, more frenzied. Terrified, I sprinted out of the warehouse, leaving the pizza and my car behind. I didn't stop running until I was back at the pizzeria, where I quit on the spot and never looked back. To this day, I have no idea what was happening in that abandoned warehouse, and I'm not sure I want to know. All I know is that some mysteries are better left unsolved. Third story, by Anonymous. It was a cold and rainy night in Seattle, and I was on my usual pizza delivery route. My last delivery of the evening was to a quiet suburban neighborhood, and the address led me to a quaint, two-story house with a well-maintained garden. I knocked on the door and waited, the raindrops tapping softly against my delivery bag. The door swung open slowly, revealing a dimly lit interior. Standing in the doorway was a woman, her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I held out the pizza and tried to smile politely, but the woman didn't respond. Instead, she gestured for me to come inside, her eyes never leaving mine. It was strange, but I figured she might have some kind of speech impediment, so I stepped cautiously into the house. The interior was immaculate, filled with antique furniture and ornate decorations. The woman led me to the dining room, where a table was set for two. She pointed to a chair, indicating that I should sit. I did as she silently instructed, feeling a growing sense of unease. The woman disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a bottle of wine, pouring a glass for each of us. She raised her glass in a silent toast, and I obliged, hoping that the interaction would be over soon. As I took a bite of the pizza, I couldn't help but notice the eerie silence that filled the room. No background noise, no music, not even the sound of the rain outside. It was as if the world had gone still. Then, the woman did something that sent a chill down my spine. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook and pen. She began to write furiously, her eyes never leaving me. She held up the notebook, and I could see the words she had written. "I know what you did." My heart raced, and I tried to stammer out a response, but before I could, she wrote again. "You took something from me." I had no idea what she was talking about, but I felt a growing sense of dread. The woman's eyes bore into mine, and I couldn't tear my gaze away from her. Suddenly, she stood up and walked toward the door, motioning for me to follow. I hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly got up from the table and followed her out of the house. She led me to a small shed at the back of the property. The rain had intensified, soaking us both as we reached the shed's door. She opened it slowly, revealing a dark, cramped interior. I stepped inside, and my heart sank as I realized what I was looking at, A room filled with dozens of pizza delivery uniforms, all stained with what appeared to be blood. The woman pointed accusingly at me, her eyes filled with rage. I backed away, my mind racing. I had no idea what was happening or how I had gotten caught up in this nightmare. But I knew one thing for sure: I had to get out of there. I bolted from the shed, running through the rain-soaked garden and back to my car. I didn't stop driving until I was far away from that house and that terrifying woman. To this day, I have no idea who that woman was or what she meant by, "I know what you did." But one thing is certain: I'll never forget that night, and I'll always wonder what dark secrets lay hidden in that suburban home. Thank you for sticking with us through the whole video. Also, I recommend you this video you see on screen, one of the scariest on my channel. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. This helps me bring you more thrilling content every day. If this video sent shivers down your spine, let me know in the comments.